like I think one of the things that are helpful if each individual could reproduce the other one's position to make sure we're not talking past each other. So
okay,
if I could state your position and you interrupt me if I get anything wrong, I would imagine your position. I would imagine your position would be something like organisms are anisogamous, meaning they produce different sized gametes. The nature of the gamete is binary, and that determines the sex. With an added qualification, although this really doesn't appear in biological journals.
So I should stop you now if there's something wrong.
I was about to add in the thing with centered on the production of the given gamete, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, well, I guess one of the things I would say is that it's not so much the gamete that defines the sex as it is the phenotype that defines the sex, and the phenotype is structured around the gamete. Does that make sense?
I mean, it may or may not make sense depending on how you unpack that.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
So I could envision. So I mean, here's the ultimate question: is can there be an organism that is quote unquote structured around the production of both gametes?
Yes, there can be, and there are organisms that are like that, but there are no humans that are like that. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Okay.
There are no mammals in general. Probably more. Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure if that's the case. I would have to get into more about what it could or could not be the case depending on how you're defining structured around production. So if there's going to be there may be some vagary there.
Sure.
But regardless, I mean, I think there's nothing logically impossible about it. Like, for example, you could have, wait, just hold on. Let me message someone who's interested in listening. So there's nothing logically impossible about having a human that is structured around production of both gametes. We may or may not have observed a human that is structured to produce both gametes, depending on how you define centered around the production of it. We have observed humans that can produce both gametes, but depending on how you define centered around production of it,
or structured around the production, yeah,
depending on how many features you consider necessary or not, they may or may not fall into the criteria of structured around the production of both. But certainly, I think we would agree that there's nothing logically impossible about a human that can be born with producing both gametes and structured around the production of both gametes.
But what it would require, if it, like, I agree that it's not logically impossible, but what it would require is a third phenotype. Yeah. So you would need not. Sorry.
When you say third phenotype, what do you mean? Just the phenotype that's structured around production of both gametes?
Yeah. So the female phenotype is structured around large, and the male phenotype is structured around small. So what you would require is a third phenotype that was structured around both. Whereas what happens in humans is you either get you don't get a third phenotype that's actually structured around producing both phenotypes. What you get when you get, as close as humans come to being hermaphroditic, is you will either get a male phenotype that has female gametes in it, or you will get or vice versa, but you won't get a third phenotype.
Okay, so I mean, I guess that could be true or not, depending on what you consider to be the third phenotype or not, where you draw your criteria for what would be considered the phenotype or not. There's some vagary there. I could unpack that. I don't think I need to, though, because I think that view has a reductio.
Okay.
So I think just the question of, I mean, the ultimate question is, do you think that an individual that can biologically reproduce sexual reproduction, and biologically father children, do you think that doesn't entail them being a male sex, or having the characteristic of male sex?
So, well, it would depend on what their phenotype was, because I would say their sex is whatever their phenotype is. So, if they, like, for instance, if they have like external testicles and a penis, and internal ovaries, that person would be male.
Even if they could mother children.
Well, I mean, that person could, theoretically, potentially have eggs removed, and those become, become fertilized and become a life. But it's not as though their mother, they can't mother children reproductively. Like, I mean, like, biologically. Sorry, not biologically, internally.
right. They can mother children biologically.
Yes.
But
well, that's kind of, is that confirmed, or is that sort of like,
there's no reason. Okay, let's put it like this. There's
from what I understand,
there's no reason for us to believe that they couldn't. Let's put it that way.
Well, there are reasons. Like, I mean, there are some like. It would be pretty remarkable. Like, I don't think you'd be surprised if it came out either way. Like, if it turned out that that it actually didn't work. I wouldn't be like,
I mean, I think that's fine. I think I don't need it to be the case. I think as long as the case is that it's possible, I think the case that sex is not binary goes through.
Sure.
And here's why.
So I guess. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why is just based on what it means to be binary. Or what it means for a variable to be binary. What it means for a variable to be binary is just that
it has to be one or the other, and it has to be exclusive, and you can't be both at the same time.
Yeah. And even that's
why it's defined around the phenotype, which is exclusive.
It's it's not. I mean, here's the thing. It's just there's a difference between not observing an individual with both phenotypes and not being able to observe an individual.
You mean sorry, do you mean gametes or phenotypes?
Phenotypes. Even if you want to go away from the gametic view and you want to take the view that there needs to be some vague definition that fulfills the requirement of being structured around production of a given gamete. Even if you want to take that view, it still doesn't get you to sex being binary. And we can get into why. So
sure.
So even if you want to take that view where you need to have a phenotype that is centered around production of a given gamete, as long as it's possible to be the case that you can have or at least there's nothing that's physically impossible about it or logically impossible about it. It's just not been observed, depending on how you structure the definition. As long as that's possible, and because we do see it in non-mammalian species, so it clearly is possible for sexual organisms to have this criteria, then sex can't be binary. And here's why. Because what it means to be binary is that it's a logical exclusive disjunction. It's not just that values that... So, for example, let's say we have two values and there's only two possible values.
Mm-hmm.
And we only observe two values. That's binary. I agree that system is binary. Now, if there is a system which we only observe two possible values, but there is a third possible value, So let's say
Mhm.
someone's working, instead of binary code, someone's working with ternary code, right? So instead of a code that's with zeros that allows zeros and ones, the code allows zeros, ones, and twos, right?
Mhm.
Now let's just say it just happens to be the case that in this ternary code, no value of 2 was ever entered, right? The question is it binary code or ternary code? And so long as it's possible for there to be a value of 2 entered in addition to the 0 and the 1, it's ternary code. The fact that you only observe zeros and ones doesn't actually entail the code to be binary.
Sure. Right. But yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So in the case where we have the phenotypes, so we have phenotype requirement A, B, and C. Even if we haven't observed C in mammals, the fact that it can be, it's the fact that it can be observed, the fact that it can be the case, it clearly is the case in non-mammals, which entails that sex is non-binary in those contexts. It would also entail that sex is not binary in this context, unless there's some argument that there's an impossibility for it to be the case, for it to ever be the case in mammals.
Yeah, well, I guess yeah, I don't know. I'm having trouble putting into words why I find that unconvincing, which is probably not surprising. But I guess how am I if it's theoretically possible for there to be a third phenotype, we have to operate as though there is one. Is that what you're saying?
No, not operate as though there is one. It's just operating as we have to, what it entails. It's not an entailment on how we have to operate. It's just an entailment about what the categorization system is. So long as it's possible for there to be a third value, the categorization system can't be binary by definition.
Sure. Okay. Well, the reason why there can't be a third value, what I would say, is because those values are determined by two, like the way you get a male and the way you get a female is from, at least out of humans, is from the, like, when a human life is first conceived, you've got 6 to 8 weeks where it is a bipotential it has bipotential gonads, so it's neither male or female. And then at about 6 to 8 weeks gestation, the fetus starts to develop down either the Müllerian or the Wolffian, the male and the female.
Yeah, I'm aware of
one. Okay. So what I'm saying is for there to be
but there are issues. Yeah, but the problem
for there
is
to be a third phenotype, there would need to be a third structure there, or there would need to be
there wouldn't.
Why?
Because so long as there are both structures there doesn't need to be a third type of structure. So for example, okay, so
but there can't be both. There can't be both. There's no like a every life goes down either one or the other path. There can be complications when it does, but no one didn't go down no path.
No mammal, no human, you're saying? Because we agree there are organisms that are non-human that have gone down both paths, that do have
no, because those species don't well, I have no knowledge about, like, for instance, like those penis fencing slugs. I have no knowledge about where they come from in terms of, they wouldn't have a bipotential gonad because they don't split into two different, they're not a anisogamous species, so they wouldn't have that mechanism, whereas humans do have that mechanism, and it divides us into male and female.
Wait, we don't have to go to penis fencing slugs. It's just, the question is, are there on your view, are there anisogamous species with true simultaneous hermaphroditism? Yeah, are there anisogamous species with true simultaneous hermaphroditism?
I don't think so, because I think like when anisogamous species are hermaphroditic, it tends to be like sequential hermaphrodites. They'll change sex, but species that are simultaneously hermaphroditic are that sex the whole are that one hermaphroditic sex the whole time.
Are you sure about that?
No.
Okay. So
if you've got better knowledge, then tell me.
Well, I'm just saying that there's no reason. I don't think there's a reason to believe that this is physically impossible, is what I'm saying. So as long as I don't need to bring to the case that this has been observed, so long as it's physically possible for this to happen, then
right. And I'm saying the reason it isn't physically possible to happen is because
reason?
it has to go down one or the other. Like human development has to go down the Wolffian or the Müllerian.
That's
pathways.
Typical human. Well, that's
no. That's every single human, including intersex humans.
Wait, what's the argument for that?
Every single human has to go when they at 6 to 8 weeks. Every single human develops into develops down either the male or female pathways, including intersex people with intersex conditions.
Okay, and
that's how you know what intersex condition they have, because they might go down the male pathway and then have certain complications that have different problems.
Can they go down both pathways?
No.
What's the argument for that?
It just
that's just a repetition of the claim. That's just to say that it's impossible. That's what he's asking for a proof for.
Who's this?
Oh, that's Isaac. He's someone who's good with philosophy and logic. But he's good if we're ever talking past each other, he can maybe give some clarity.
Okay.
But I guess the situation is like you're making a claim that this is impossible, and then you're saying the reason it's impossible is because each individual has to go through down one of these two pathways. And I ask you if they can go down both. You're saying no, and I'm asking you what's the argument for why it can't be the case, why it's impossible to be the case that an individual can go down both.
I don't know enough about the biology of it. I think it's something to do with the mechanisms, because the reason why you can't go down both is because when you go down one, mechanisms.
Yeah, I can help you out. There are inhibitory. I mean, I can help you out here. There's inhibitory mechanisms that when you go down one pathway, there's inhibitory mechanisms that inhibit the other pathway. Like I know,
and destroy it.
Yeah, and destroy it. I agree. But that actually doesn't make the case that it's impossible to go down both pathways. It just means that in typical, normally functioning individuals going down pathways, or even every individual that we have observed, although I'm not too quick to grant that claim, those pathways that destroy the counter opposing one are intact. But there's no argument that has to be the case. There could very well be just a malfunction of the inhibitory mechanisms of the other pathway, and the other pathway just ends up developing anyway. I'm just asking for an argument for why that couldn't happen.
I don't know the science behind it. There are things similar to that can happen. In terms of like, you can have what is it? Shit, I should know these conditions better. But yeah, you can have certain situations where the other one won't get fully how does it work? I don't know enough about it. Oops.
Yeah, I mean, there's things like there's things like anti-Müllerian hormone.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: like, none of these things are going to get you to where you want to go. None of these mechanisms are going to establish that it's impossible to be the case that someone can go down both pathways. And so long as
okay, yep.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And so long as that's the case, so long as there's no argument for being impossible for an individual to have both characteristics. So characteristic of being organized around production of male gametes and characteristic of organized around being production of female gametes. It entails that there are three. It entails that there are three categories. There, or at least it's a system where there can be three categories.
Right, but you're categorizing them slightly differently.
No, I'm not. I'm categorizing them the same way you are. I'm just working within your system. It's an internal critique. I agree that I have a different system of categorizing sex than you. I think there are reasons.
Yeah, but I think what you're doing is you're saying that the sex is defined by the gamete, and so you're going.
No. I'm working within your system. I'm saying sex is defined by the phenotype, just like you said.
Right. Yeah.
I said there's the phenotype.
So what other species, what other species has there been where we've had such intimate knowledge of them as we do with humans, where there's been an entirely third phenotype which doesn't exist in any other, where has this ever happened before? Why would we be discovering a new phenotype in this point?
Well, that's a different question to whether. So for the first thing I'll point out is why we would do it is tangential. It's a tangential question to whether the categorization is binary or not. Even if there's no utility or usefulness to categorizing it as non-binary, that's a separate question as to whether the categorization schema is in fact non-binary. So I just want you to be sensitive to that. So you're asking a question that's tangential to what we were coming to discuss, because I didn't come in here to discuss whether it's useful or not. If it turns out that sex is not binary, I came to discuss if sex is in fact not binary. Whether that's useful or not.
Sure, but you're not. Well, but most of the discussion hasn't been around whether sex is binary. It's around whether it theoretically could be binary, which seems to be another.
Wait, no, because binary systems are about if they could. It's not, because remember, that's why we went through the code analogy. Because remember, you agreed that if there's ternary code, if someone's working within a system that there can be three values, there can be a 0, 1, and 2, even if they only use ones and zeros, it's not a binary code.
Sure. So I'm saying I have not seen any evidence for a 2. And I'm saying that I haven't seen any evidence for a 2 or even so I don't know.
So why. Wait. Well, first of all, that's not true. I mean, there's simultaneous hermaphrodites that produce both male and female gametes. I mean,
yeah, but that's not a third phenotype.
Oh, there doesn't need to be. So there doesn't actually. So this is another issue. So there actually doesn't need to be 3 possible phenotypes in order for the sex categorization schema with respect to organisms to not be binary. This is another thing we actually should clear up.
Okay.
So instead of using, it's like this. So let's say instead of using 0, 1, and 2, let's say we used 0, 1, and let's say we just had a hypothetical number that can be both a 0 and a 1.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. So there's 3 possibilities that each value can take. Mm-hmm. There is a 0, a 1, and a 0 and 1. 0, 1. Mm-hmm. Now, that is not a binary system. Even though the bit system it's based off is binary, the code itself is still not binary because there's 3 possible values. So there doesn't actually need to be a third gamete or a third phenotype in order for sex to not be binary. As long as, because remember, if it's an exclusive disjunction, it's not just that what entails it to be binary is that there's 2, that the bit system is binary. It means that there's an exclusive disjunction to that bit system as well. Uh-huh. So in other words, it's that there's a 0 and a 1, and there cannot be a value which is 0 and 1. So as long as it's possible to have a phenotype for which one individual can be both male and female phenotype, even though the bit system is binary, the categorization system the bit system is based off is actually not binary.
Yeah. I don't think the description... shit. Sorry. I don't think you're giving the...
Are you trying to say that you're surprised that I'm not giving you the sex as a spectrum spiel?
No. I just don't think that. Yeah, I think what you're describing when you say a 0 and a 1, those people are either a 0 or a 1 because their phenotype is either male or female.
What's the argument for that? Like, are you saying, wait, just to be clear, are you saying it's impossible for there to be a individual that is male and female?
Yes. I
What's
guess
the argument
for humans.
Okay.
Yes.
What's the argument for that?
Because humans only have 2 phenotypes, a male phenotype and a female phenotype.
Wait, but that doesn't mean it's impossible for a human to have both phenotypes. That just means that's what we've observed.
No, well, because of the bipotential gonad, the reason why we have 2 different phenotypes is because up until 6 to 8 months, we have a bipotential gonad, then we split down either the male or female pathways.
Yeah, we've been through this already. So that also doesn't entail that being both male and female is impossible. It just means that's what we've observed, and there are mechanisms that account for why we've observed that. There's no argument there that it's impossible to have a male and female.
Well, how would one arise? How would a male and female arise?
Yeah, so first thing I'll point out to you is that I don't actually need to give you an explanation for how a male and female to arise in order for it to be possible. Things can be possible without a known explanation. But what I can tell you is
what's an example of that? What's an example of that?
What's an example of something that is possible without a known explanation for how it's possible?
Yeah,
there are plenty of examples of that. We don't have the full explanation for quantum mechanics effects. It's still unknown. Many unknown mechanisms exist there to this day. Yet we accept certain things happen from them. We don't have a full.
All right, give a different example.
We don't have a full. I mean, we don't.
Just that I know that
full,
quantum mechanics is like a common place that people use the fact that it's quite a complicated thing to
yeah, we don't actually know all of the mechanisms of how Tylenol works to this date, by the way. We know some of them, but not all of them, yet we accept that the outcomes of Tylenol are the outcomes of Tylenol.
I think that's not an apt comparison.
We don't know Hawking we accept that Hawking radiation happens, and we don't know the full mechanism to how that happens.
Yeah, but this is things we can see and know exist. These aren't hypothetical things like
yeah. But the point is, no. Well, I understand you. Well, the reason I'm giving it to you is because you've asked me for an example. The broader point here is not. The broader point here is just that the fact that we don't have an explanation of a given phenomena doesn't mean that the given phenomena is actually impossible.
Yeah, like there could be a Loch Ness monster.
Right, but here's the point though. The point is that what is entailed by a categorization system that is binary is not just that we don't observe third values. What's entailed by a binary categorization system is that it's defined that there cannot be a third value. Right. Remember the ternary code issue? It's not just that the issue is not just that there is no observed third value. The issue is that there cannot be. It's impossible for there to be a third value by definition of what it means for the code to be binary. Now, in order to say that, yeah, so as long as it's possible for there to be a third value, then sex cannot be, or any.
But there is no third value.
Yeah, even if there isn't. Yeah, so even if there isn't no third value, it doesn't actually follow that sex is binary. Just like with the ternary code system, even if there's no third value in a ternary code system, if there can be a third value and it just hasn't been entered, it's a ternary code system. It's not a binary code system, or more than a ternary code. It could be
sure. So what? How are you showing that it could be possible? Like what mechanism? Yeah. By what mechanism would we get a? Oh, but then you don't have to give a mechanism because theoretical things can happen, and
there's no contradiction. There's no logical contradiction that's entailed. You can make the case that if you could find a logical contradiction, then that would be the strongest way to show that it's impossible. if you want to say it's impossible, you can state the proposition and its negation that the claim sex is not binary affirms, if you can do that.
I didn't understand what you said.
well, so when we say something is impossible, there's two common things we can mean. We can mean that it's logically impossible, meaning that unless you're a dialetheist, we don't have to get into what that means. That it entails a contradiction.
Yeah.
Right. So the other thing that we can mean is that it's physically impossible, and what we mean by that is that there's a contradiction with respect to the laws of physics. Now, I don't see a case for there being an argument for there being a contradiction for either of those things, a contradiction with the laws of logic and a contradiction with the laws of physics, for there to be a mammal with true simultaneous hermaphroditism. Or actually, I shouldn't even use true simultaneous hermaphroditism, because you actually wouldn't consider true simultaneous hermaphroditism to be both male and female, because you have a different definition of male and female that that biologists use. But even with your definition, I would actually make that, and just a side point, I would make the case that you are using a proprietary definition. But even with your even going with your proprietary definition, I think that sex would still not be binary, just by what it means to be binary. To be binary, it means that it's impossible for there to be a third value.
And there is no third value.
No, but it does. See, what it means to be binary is it's not that it is the third value. That's not what it means to be binary. What it means to be binary is that it's impossible for there to be a third value. You understand the difference between those two?
I think I get what you're saying. I think probably if I knew the biology of it better, I could argue why it's impossible, but obviously I don't. So I think that's
but as long as you understand what it is that you need to show and to make the case that it's not binary. It's not that you need to show that there is no value that is a third type of value. That doesn't show that the categorization schema is binary. What needs to be shown is that it's actually not possible for there to be a third value in the categorization schema.
Yeah.
Now, usually this is done analytically. So, for example, in binary code, it's just analytically defined to be the case that for all values within the schema, it's only possible for there to be two possible values, and that's what it means to be binary code. You can only have two possible values. And if there ever could be a third value, not if there ever is a third value, if there ever could be a third value, then it by definition just wouldn't be binary code. It could be ternary code, it could be something else.
Right.
So the easy way to do it is just set it up by definition. But it's not clear that this can be done in the case of sex. In the case of sex, there doesn't seem to be any argument for why, as you're defining it, it would be impossible for an individual to be both male and female at the same time. And I think even in non-mammals.
Well, no. It would be like you haven't. There's what you're just saying.
The argument
Theoretically.
Yeah, because here's the thing.
Because there's no way to explain how it would be possible.
That's not an argument for it to be impossible. We went through this already. So the fact that saying there's no way to explain that it would be impossible is actually a stronger claim. The fact that I don't have an explanation doesn't mean there's no way to explain it. It could be that there's So that's actually a stronger claim. You'd have to make an argument for that. But if you want to just say that I don't have an explanation, that doesn't show that that there can't be an explanation, nor does it show that it's impossible for it to occur. It just means that it's something I don't have an explanation for. But that's okay.
Sure.
If I don't, it's not a problem for the non-binary conception. Yeah.
I mean, it would be a problem, like in terms of the Yeah. Crap. This is going terribly.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Listen, you could think it over, and listen. I would also review those. So here's what I would review. I would review like strictly what it means to be binary. I would review like what it means. And I can like give sources here.
Yeah. No, I feel like there's something in like what you're saying regards like around it. Yeah, in regards to possibilities. Yeah.
It's just, I mean, it's simple. It's just the issue is that binary categorization systems are analytically defined to be such that it's not possible for there to be a third value. Right. That's what makes it binary. That it's not that there isn't a third value.
Yeah, but okay. So if I say because there can't be a third value in a binary system.
It's not that there isn't. It's not that just we happen to observe it and we didn't find one. It's that it's not possible for there to be one.
Yeah, okay. Here's why there can't be, I guess, because we would, if there was a third phenotype, it would have a mechanism like to come into play via. Like you would, there would be some kind of evidence in, like there would be some equivalent of, we would have a tripotential gonad. Or something akin along those lines.
What's the argument for that?
Because phenotypes come from, like, the origin of the development of our phenotypes comes from the bipotential gonad, right?
Yeah, I understand that. That's what's observed.
So if there were to be 3 phenotypes, we would have to have like a tripotential gonad.
What's the argument that well, first of all, I mean there's two things. So the first thing is you need an argument that there would need to be a tripotential gonad rather than a bipotential gonad that just forms both gonads. Because remember, you don't need to have like a 0, 1, and 2. You can have a 0 and a 1 and a 0, 1. That also gives you a non-binary code. So there's 2 ways you can have a trinary code, right? So you can have a trinary code by having a 0, a possibility to be a 0,
because of the way that the gonads work, where they wipe out the other
we've been through that as well.
So that's why they can't go down both at the same time.
Yeah,
so if you wanted a third thing, if you wanted a third phenotype, you would need a third structure that was there. So if it wanted to develop into that one, it would destroy the other 2.
So what's the argument? So no, you don't have to explain to me the way that it works. I'm aware of like those mechanisms. I just want to know what the argument is that there couldn't be a case where the counter-inhibitory mechanisms of the Wolffian and Müllerian system don't function against each other and they just develop both. Like, why is that impossible?
I guess that's the question I need to answer. Yeah, why is it impossible? Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure, but it just seems from the available evidence that it is.
Well, that doesn't get you to non-binary. I mean, yeah, you could be like, you can observe ternary code and all you see are 0s and 1s, but the code is still ternary if it's possible for there to be a third value.
Sure, but if you observed pages and pages and pages and pages, I know it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
I know it's not conclusive. I know it's not.
Not conclusive. That it's not. Not that it's not conclusive. It's not like a probability thing. It's like if someone says, "Listen, it's possible for there to be a 0, 1 value," and you observe pages and pages and pages of 0s and 1s only. It's not. It's 100% non-binary. Like the code is
right, but that's when you've been told what the code is ahead of time.
Yeah,
if you're just looking at random pages of code, and you see thousands of pages, and it's all 1s and 0s. That's not conclusive that it's binary, but it's very like suggestive.
No, it's because that doesn't give you any reason to believe that it's impossible for there to be a third value.
I never said impossible. I said
but that's what's needed.
It suggests that it's binary.
But that's what's because what's needed to make the suggestion that it is not binary is that it is you need to have a reason to believe that it's impossible, not that it's not there, that it's impossible for there to be a third value. I would turn your attention also to the organisms, like, and I would, the other question I would ask of you is, I would really ask why, if you have true simultaneous hermaphroditism in species that produce both gametes, why you think it would be impossible for it to occur in mammals just because you haven't observed both phenotypes. I mean, clearly,
I think it's something about the structure, like the same way isogamy is like
no, I think they're I think it's
connect. Hang on. The same way that isogamy, not anisogamy, the same way that isogamy, producing one-sized gamete, is connected to being like a single-celled organism. I think, and that scientists seem to think that the reason why anisogamy developed was it allows more complicated structures. I think there's a similar thing in that, yeah, you can get some freaky shit happening with fish and bugs and stuff because they're less complicated life form. But as the life forms get more complex, then those types of things like isogamy and simultaneous hermaphrodites and that kind of thing doesn't happen.
Yeah, so this doesn't get you to non-binary. That's just so that's a hypothesis of observation and for why we observe the things we observe. What it isn't is an argument for why it's impossible to have more than two values, which is really what needs to be the case to make the claim that sex is not binary. So what you need to do is you need to have an argument for why it is not just that it's not observed, or not just that it won't be observed.
Yeah, and that's that it can't go down both pathways.
That it can't be observed.
I can't tell you why you can't go down both pathways, but I know that you can't.
Well, more accurately,
or I feel like you can't.
More accurately, it's very rare, if at all, that we've observed individuals going down both pathways. But that doesn't make an argument for it being impossible to go down both pathways. It certainly doesn't seem, well, at least we haven't seen an argument for why it's impossible to go down both pathways. So that's the first thing you need to do. You need to have an argument for there to be an impossibility.
Why don't you have to make the argument that it is possible to go down both pathways?
Yeah, because I just don't see, because there's no contradiction.
That doesn't seem to be how those mechanisms work in any other context. So why would?
Well, that's okay. It's okay if the mechanisms don't work such that a third value is produced, because that's not what it means.
No. But even like what you're saying, go down both. Like there's no third value. There's both gametes, but it comes from people developing down both the Wolffian and Müllerian structures simultaneously. Why don't you have to prove that's possible?
Well, it doesn't entail a contradiction. I think it is possible because it's perfect. It's coherently conceptual, and it doesn't entail a contradiction. And so
I don't know if it's coherently. I don't know if it is coherently.
Well, what's the incoherence?
Or conceptually coherent.
Is there like a contradiction that's entailed?
Yeah. What is that? What is the contradiction? Why can't you? I think it's about the nature of the mechanisms. I can't really.
Well, because here's the thing: like with binary code, I can spell the contradiction out, right? So.
Sure, because you can just go, you can make the binary code example and you can say, and then the 1, 0, and that's the third option.
Hold
and
on,
that's
I just have to respond to Pragma in the chat. Like, no, this is just cringe, Pragma. Like to go like based off like the voltage I understand like you can have like a binary variable based off like a continuous voltage variable, but that's clearly not what we're talking about here. Like, okay, we can have that conversation later. The point is with binary code, which is a very good, which I do maintain is a good example, despite this voltage sophistry. Binary code, I can spell out the contradiction. So binary code, it's defined to be that every value can only be one of two values. And if I say that this is binary code and has 3 values, it is and is not the case that there can only be 2 values. So that's a proposition and negation. That's a clear contradiction. Now, what's the clear contradiction with the categorization of sex if there's more than 2 values? If there's more than 2 values, like what's the proposition and negation?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So we understood how with binary code, if we say that there's a third value, that there would be a contradiction.
Sure. Yeah.
Like I guess logical contradiction.
Yep.
Okay. Now, in the case of sex, if there's more than 2 sexes, does that entail a contradiction?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess up until now, I would have said no. Yep.
Yeah. Well, then if it doesn't, then it seems to be the case that it's possible for there to be a third sex. As long as it's possible, even if it's not observed, this categorization scheme is not binary.
Right. Yeah. I just yeah. So they get both gametes. Yeah, it doesn't matter though. Yeah, okay. They wouldn't develop. Yeah, they wouldn't develop a third phenotype though.
Doesn't matter. It's not about wouldn't. It's about couldn't.
Yeah, they couldn't develop a third phenotype.
What's the argument for that?
Because the phenotype comes from either the Wolffian or Müllerian structures.
What's the argument that they couldn't go through both?
They could, but that wouldn't produce. I mean, I don't know if they could, but like it wouldn't produce a third phenotype.
It wouldn't produce. Well, yeah, the third phenotype would be, because remember how we already talked about how there's 2 different ways to get a non-binary schema. So if you have a number system that's 0 only, 1 only, and a number that's a 0 and a 1, even though the bit system itself is binary, the numbers, the categorization system, that's the bit system, that's based off the bit system is still non-binary because there's three possible values. So we said that if you have a phenotype structured around the production of sperm, for example, that entails that you are a male. If you have a phenotype structured around the production of eggs, that entails that you're a female.
Yep.
If you have a phenotype, what is entailed from that is that if you have a phenotype that is structured around the production of sperm and structured around the production of eggs, then it is entailed that you are male and female. Now, just like in the case of code, where you can have a 0 only, a 1 only, and if you have a numeric system where it's possible to have a value that's 0 and 1, so you have the 3 options are 1 only, 0 only, 1 and 2.
Right. Yeah. But that third option, those people wouldn't be like you don't get the third phenotype isn't a like
it's not based off. I understand what you're saying. So what you would say is that okay. Yeah.
That this third phenotype would either be male or female, and it would have
male and female, or male and female.
No,
it would be male, female, or male and female. So there's 3 different phenotypes. So phenotype 1 is male only, phenotype 2 is female only, and phenotype 3 is male and female. Now, notice...
No. Because the previous 2 phenotypes, they could also have been like, if you're trying to just say that, like, particular chromosomes.
You didn't say anything about chromosomes.
I know, but you were talking about people being male and female simultaneously. And so you're
saying if it's possible to be male and female simultaneously, not if there are, if it's possible, then
yeah,
what
it's
would...
not.
Well, okay. Well, then you need... Well, before we get into whether it's not, let's discuss, for the sake of the argument, if it is possible, you would have to understand how the categorization schema is not binary, even though the bit system is binary. Is that not clear? If that's not clear, we can go through that before and then we can go through
I do understand that. The categorization system isn't binary, even though the bit system is binary. Yeah, I get that.
Okay, cool. Now, if you want to say it's not possible for that to occur, for it to occur that an individual is both male and female, then what's the argument for that? What's the contradiction that's entailed?
It's a I think it's a physical impossibility, not so much a logical impossibility.
Okay, so you would say logically sex is not binary, but physically it is binary. Is that your position?
No. I'm saying logically it's binary, physically it's binary.
If you're saying logically it's binary, if you're saying logically it's binary, then you need to actually demonstrate the contradiction for a third value. So what's the proposition and negation?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, so it doesn't... Well, that's the problem, right? Because clearly you see the proposition and negation with binary code, right? You see that there's it entails a contradiction, that it is and is not the case that there are only two values, because it's defined to be only two possible values. And if there's a third value, to say that it's binary would be a contradiction.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't seem to be the case. There's clearly no contradiction entailed by saying that three categorical values with sex, what proposition and negation does that affirm? Where's the logical contradiction there?
Right. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't think it is. I think it's I think it's more of a physical impossibility.
Okay, cool. So then let's go back. So just to be clear, your position would be that sex is logically non-binary, but physically it's binary. Is that your position?
Logically it could be more. Well, because sex is more than sex isn't just a human specific thing.
Yeah, I understand.
So
I'm just using your definition of sex.
I know. I'm just trying to work through it. Yeah, sorry, what was the question again?
Yeah, is it your view that logically sex is non-binary, but physically it's binary?
Right, but physically it's binary. Yeah, let's go with that and see what happens.
Okay, cool. Now, so then you need an argument for how it's biologically not possible for there to be a male and female.
Sure.
Now, we tried the Wolffian Müllerian system. We showed why that doesn't work. Is there another argument for why?
No, I don't think we have.
Well,
I think I just need to learn more about the structures and why it's impossible to develop down both pathways. And then
when you do that,
consistent.
And yeah, sure. But when you do that, I would just encourage you to not start from your conclusion when you're looking at the data and then just see what you could find to fit your conclusion. I would actually say, okay, wait a minute. Is it actually physically impossible? Like what violation of the laws of physics isn't actually entailed here? Like what's entailed to be violated for this to be the case? Like how is this physically impossible? And I would see
actually, how in what other circumstance does a functioning phenotype come out of where is the example of that ever happening? Like a functioning phenotype coming out of both structures being produced simultaneously?
Well, I don't need to show you a example of it happening for it to be biologically possible. Even if I had no examples, what I can tell you is that there are, but just to overdetermine it, what I can tell you is that there are anisogamous, simultaneously hermaphroditic species that are structured, that have phenotypes that are structured around the production of both gametes.
Simultaneous hermaphrodites that are anisogamous. Which ones? What are they?
I'm pretty sure this exists in plants. There are some plants that produce both ovum and sperm. I mean, I'm just reading that. Let's see. There are haploid gametophyte phases of some fungi that are hermaphroditic. They produce both male and female gametes.
Anything that has a pulse?
Well, there may be. I have to look further into it. But notice that it doesn't need to be the case that I have to show you an example for it to be biologically possible.
Sure.
There can be, could be, yeah. I mean, that's not a requirement here. I can look into it further. I can look into like different anisogamous simultaneous hermaphroditic species. And we can, I mean, but that's an academic discussion. It wouldn't like hinge on the debate proposition.
Sure.
The point is that you would need to make an like a clear argument for why it's biologically impossible for there to be an individual that has that is both male and female. And this is like on top of all the other issues that I would levy against like the proprietary definition that I think you're using. I think actually the definition biologists use is not what you're describing. There's like a whole bunch of other objections I would levy toward you, but like this is the central one. Yeah, the central one is just that even on your definition, even on your definition, it's not clear why you would think sex is not binary.
Well, just because I don't think someone
certainly logically, but it's not clear, and even physically it's not clear.
Yeah, I just don't think that there's a I don't think it's possible to develop down both pathways.
But that's just reaffirming the same.
And also, I don't think developing down both pathways would necessarily produce a third. I don't even know what the fuck would happen.
But it would. We already went through that. We should go through that. Yeah, we should go through that. Yeah.
No, because okay.
Yeah. So you already agreed that if an individual is organized around production of sperm, if their phenotype is organized around production of sperm, that is a sufficient criteria to be male. You agree? Yeah. Okay. You agree that if an individual's phenotype is organized around production of eggs, that's a sufficient criteria to be female. You agree?
Yep.
Okay. Now, would you agree that that it's entailed from this, that if an individual phenotype is organized around production of sperm and organized around production of eggs, that it's entailed that they are both male and female?
Yeah, but I don't agree that just because a body can this is
wait, we can go into the next step. Don't go steps ahead. Yeah, do you agree with that?
That
they're both male and female.
If they can produce both gametes.
Not just that they can produce both. No, I didn't say that. Not
that their phenotype is structured around the production of both gametes.
Yeah. Are they male and female?
I guess that's the third sex. Yeah.
Cool. We agree that's the third sex. Okay. Cool. So.
Or if that's what's happening, if there is a third phenotype, if it's not just one of the previous two phenotypes with both gametes in it.
Yeah, I'm talking about, just to be clear, I'm talking about if there is an individual whose phenotype is structured around the production of sperm and structured around the production of eggs.
Yeah.
You would agree that that is a male and female?
Yes.
Okay. Now, do you need an explanation of why that would need to be a third phenotype or a third category for sex, or should we go into that?
Yeah, no, I understand why that's a third category. Yep.
Okay, cool. So what you need to do is you need to have an argument for why it's not biologically possible for you need to have an argument for why it's not biologically possible for an individual to be male and female. That's what you need to do.
Because there's no pathway for a human to develop down that would get them.
There's no biologically possible pathway, or there's no observed pathway?
I'd say biologically possible.
What's the argument for that?
That you need a that there's no structure in the bimodal gamete to support that.
What's the argument for that? That there could that there is no, or that there couldn't be biologically?
Probably that there couldn't be. If I understood enough of how the because the pathways are exclusive.
Well, the pathways, no, just to be clear, the pathways are exclusive with functioning mutually competitive inhibitory signals. So that's what makes the pathways exclusive. It's not that they're intrinsically exclusive. They're exclusive because there are things like anti-Müllerian hormone. There's counter-inhibitory hormones. If you develop down one pathway, it inhibits the other. Now, the problem here is that doesn't entail that it's biologically impossible to go down both pathways. It just means that there are mechanisms by which the other pathway is inhibited. It's not clear why there couldn't be a case where the inhibitory mechanisms are just non-functional and both pathways develop. Now, what I would want to see is an argument for why it's biologically impossible for both pathways to develop.
Sure. Yeah. Yep. I'll get onto that.
And I would also look into true simultaneous hermaphrodism in an anisogamous species. So just so we're clear, we agree that logically speaking, sex is non-binary. You concede that. Is that correct? Hello? Logically speaking, sex is non-binary. There's no contradiction with there being a third sex. Do you agree to that?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I'm sort of undecided.
Hold on. Then what? Do you think that it entails a contradiction?
I guess I am unsure of how I would classify like a hermaphrodite.
Well, that wasn't the question. Because we're not even talking about hermaphrodites with your definition of sex. We're talking about an individual whose phenotype is structured around the production of sperm and eggs. Because remember, a biologist wouldn't have that necessary criteria for there to be a hermaphrodite. A biologist would actually just consider an organism that can produce both sperm and eggs and can reproduce with them to be a hermaphrodite, even if they didn't have like equally structured phenotypes or whatever you're saying. Mm-hmm, but anyway, so what we're talking about is an organism whose phenotype is structured around production of sperm and egg. Now, my question is, do you think that somehow entails a contradiction, a logical contradiction, like a proposition and negation being affirmed?
Yeah, probably not logical. Yeah, no.
Okay, so you agree that logically sex is non-binary.
The reason why I'm hesitant to say yes is because I guess. Yeah, I guess it's non-binary, but I don't think it necessarily therefore means that it's a spectrum.
I didn't say anything about a spectrum.
I know. I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, sure. So we agree that logically sex is non-binary. We're not saying that it's a spectrum, but we're agreeing that logically sex is non-binary. And with respect to what it physically is, you have an intuition that it's binary, but you don't have at this point in time an argument for the impossibility of a third value.
True. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So if you would like, you can look into it. And then we can pick up the discussion if you ever think that you do have an argument for why it's physically impossible for there to be a third value.
Sure. Cool.
All right. Good talk.
Yeah. Thanks for setting it all up and everything. That was great. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.
All right. See ya.